On this page, we talk about different types of research questions about a population. Now recall that a population, it's the entire group of individuals or objects that we'd like to study. Usually it's not possible to study the whole population, like we said with the US population in the previous example. It's just too many people, and it's not realistic to expect us to ask everyone that question, and not realistic to expect everyone to answer the question, I guess. So we're going to collect data from a part of the population. That's called the sample. So this probably, if you haven't written those two definitions down in your notes, it'd probably be a good idea. You might remember it, but just in case in a month, when we have the midterm or whatever it is, you forget. It's good to have it. So yeah, the population is the big group of people or objects or animals we're trying to draw a conclusion about, but the sample is the actual smaller portion of that population that we're going to actually ask the question of, or observe, or do an experiment on, whatever it is. We use the sample to draw conclusions about the population. So for example, one research question could be, what is the average amount of money spent on textbooks per semester by full-time students at MJC? The answer is a lot. Unfortunately, we cannot interview every full-time student at MJC because it would take too much time and it would cost too much money. We therefore carefully select a sample of full-time students at MJC to represent the population of all full-time students at the college. So one thing you might want to do is try to make it really random. So it would be ideal if a computer program could give us a random sample. Just take some computer program has all the names of every single student that's full-time at MJC, and it could probably generate a random sample, right? You probably wouldn't want to go, I don't know, for example, go to the library and just poll people at the library, because maybe there might be a bias there, as people that go to the library often might be more likely to buy all the books and not skip buying books, or there's some kind of bias there somehow, I don't know. So you kind of don't want to, just get people that are in this group over here, that excuse me, and then we collect data from the sample to estimate the average amount spent on textbooks. This example illustrates how the research question guides the investigation. A well-stated research question contains information about, first, the population. In this case, it would be all the full-time students at MJC. Also, the information we will collect from each individual in the sample. We want to know, what are we even asking these people? What's the poll, or in other examples, what's the experiment we want to do? We call this the variable. That would be probably a good term to write down in your notes as well. The variable is what we plan to measure, so which in this case would be the amount of money spent on textbooks per semester. Another thing you would want to think about would be a numerical characteristic about the population related to this variable. So probably the numerical characteristic would be the average amount of money spent on textbooks. So I'd probably ask, so I'm not sure what a good number of students in the sample would be, but statistical researchers would think, okay, let's say 200 students is a good number. That's not the whole population, but it's enough. So for example, I'd ask those 200 students about how much do you spend on textbooks. They'd give me their numbers, and then I'd average them out. And in the future, we'll talk more about averaging. But that would be my numerical characteristic that they're talking about. And then it says, here are some common types of research questions about a population. So one could be make an estimation about the population, often an estimation about an average value or a proportion. Because like we were talking about, if I had just asked 200 people, how much do you think you spend on textbooks? I would just have a list of 200 numbers. And if I handed that to someone, it'd be really hard for them to draw conclusions about it, because they see just 200 numbers, and that'd be hard to think about. So it's probably better to have someone do the average of that. Then I can actually wrap my mind around what the numbers mean, I guess. What is the average number of hours that community college students work each week? That's an interesting question. Also, what proportion of all U.S. college students are enrolled at a community college? That's interesting too, right? And proportion is just how many out of the total would you have? So for example, what number of college students in the U.S. are enrolled in a community college versus the total number of U.S. college students? Because they could be in community college or universities or whatever colleges. And then another type of research question could be testing a claim about the population, often a claim about the average value or a proportion with a given characteristic. So an example could be, is the average course load for a community college student greater than 12 units? Another question could be, do the majority of community college students qualify for federal student loans? Another type of research question would be comparing two populations. So often a comparison of population averages or proportions within a given characteristic. So if an example could be, in community colleges, do female students have a higher GPA than male students? That's an interesting question. So those are the two populations you're comparing, female versus male college students. Another one could be, are college athletes more likely than non-athletes to receive academic advising? So the two populations you're comparing there are college athletes and then non-college athletes. Another type of research question that could be asked is, you might want to investigate a relationship between two variables in a population. So for example, it could be, is there a relationship between the number of hours high school students spend each week on Facebook and their GPA? So I guess the idea there is the more hours you spend on Facebook, the fewer hours you're spending studying. So your GPA might go down the more hours you're spending on Facebook. I know that might be kind of dated. I know that probably only moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas are on Facebook nowadays, right? But anyway, is academic counseling associated with quicker completion of a college degree? So I think that's probably true, right? If you talk to a counselor and they tell you, oh, you're taking that class, you don't even need that class, you should take this class instead. Of course, that's going to help you graduate faster, because students, it's hard to know what classes to take unless you have some guidance, depending on your major and all kinds of stuff. But I think that's the idea. We'll see more as we go on here.